Welcome to another edition of Dungeons and Social Distancing with Nerdarchy.
In this video, we're getting back to basics with D&D spells, multiclassing, and spell slots.
Welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and as usual, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
You won't need cleric spells to divine your next D&D video if you hit that subscribe button.
You won't even need a detect spell of any kind if you attune to that notification bell, as our video notices will be delivered straight to you.
Some of you may have noticed that we are shooting our videos a little bit different than we normally do. Usually me and Ted are in person together, but we've been filming virtual during our self-quarantine since our social distancing. We are trying to follow the best practices, and also my wife and Ted's sister, who happens to be Ted's sister, is autoimmune compromised, so we're just taking all the safety precautions that we can. Hopefully you're doing the same and staying safe. With that, let's jump into our video, which of course we're going to start with a thank you to the sponsor, Dungeon Fog. Dungeon Fog is a great mapping tool. I love it. It feels like when I was a kid drawing on graph paper, but now we're doing it digital. It's actually faster, cooler, cleaner, and a whole lot prettier than what I used to do with graph paper.
So if you're really looking to try out a new mapping software, I would highly recommend you check out Dungeon Fog, as we do. You use it for all of your map making needs.
There is a free account you can sign up for to check it out, as well as tons of maps that you can download over there. There will be a link in the description.
So 5th edition has been around for many years now. And, you know, with all of the multiclassing rules that are out there, I think some people are getting multiclassing spellcasting wrong. I know I've had some issues with it, and I haven't quite memorized it. I always have to keep going back, to that chart and be like, all right, where exactly does this fall in? We felt this was a great time to, really take a step back from all of the complex stuff that we're doing, and every once in a while hit these videos that are back to basics and, go over those things that are a little bit more complex, a little bit more hard to deal with.
Yeah, I literally just got a message on Facebook the other day where I helped someone out. So I was like, oh, you know what, maybe this will be a good topic for videos. So we'll dive right into it. First, you have spell levels, right? And that is the level of the spell that you're casting. If you're not a high enough level spellcaster, wizard, cleric, druid, whatever, you don't have access to those spells yet. You can't put them in your spell book. You can't memorize them. You can't prepare them.
So a spell slot is, a section of power that you have that refills typically for most people when you finish a long rest. There are some ways of getting it back sooner than that, but it is essentially that portion of spell power that you use when you go to cast a spell, and it is determined specifically, through your progression as to what that is. They usually correlate to those spell levels. So a first level spell is cast out of a first level spell slot.
Now you can use spell slots to cast lower level spells. So if you have a third level spell, you could use it to cast a first level spell with it, but you cannot go the other way. You cannot use a first level spell slot to cast a third level spell. Some spells will even allow you to power them up by using higher spell slots. So you can do that. So next up, we also have cantrips. Cantrips are just basically spells that you can cast all the time. They're always prepared. You know them. And that is going to specifically be picked out and called out by your character class. And unlike spells that power up by the spell slot that fuels them, cantrips are actually powered by your character level. So if you're a first level fighter and a first level wizard, your character level would be 2. If any combination gets you up to 5th level, that's the next tier where cantrips begin to scale. It doesn't matter how you got there. It could only be 1 level of the spellcasting class and 4 levels of something else. You would still be considered 5th level for that cantrip.
That is one of the only real caveats to spellcasting, with the ability to branch outside of, the magic of that class and just decide, you know what, I only wanted to dabble, because you continue to advance your overall personal power gets to be enough that your cantrips are stronger. And there are definitely some character builds that stretch into those specific ideas.
So next up, you have different types of casters. You have casters that would be considered third casters, and that's your Eldritch Knight and your Arcane Trickster, meaning they don't get it. Their spell progression is a third of a full caster's.
If this happens to come out and they release other spellcasting classes that fall within the subclass. That is where you're going to find, these third casters. So there's no guarantee that they're not going to release anymore, but that is typically where you're going to find them, where the class itself does not typically get access to magic, but magic released within the subclass. That's where they're going to exist.
Next up, we have half casters, and that is your Artificer, your Paladin, and your Ranger. The Artificer was just recently added, and for those, they basically have half the power of your full casters. And when we get into multiclassing, these third casters and half casters, it's going to be more important, and we'll go in more depth.
So when you specifically look at your class breakdown, you will see the difference between the ones that don't have access to magic and the ones that do. But if you happen to compare what we have as the full casters versus these three that Dave just mentioned, you will definitely see the difference in the spell power that you get. Your half casters only ever get up to 5th level spell slots, so that definitely shows the massive difference in spell power.
Then finally, you have full casters. That is going to be your Bard, your Cleric, your Druid, your Sorcerer, and your Wizard.
So next up, we have something that stands apart from the others, and that's going to be Warlock. They get Pact Magic, which in a lot of ways does function like some of the other casters, but it is different because it resets on a short rest. It's not going to interact with multiclassing through this. So we'll get into the multiclassing with this later.
And additionally, Warlocks always cast their spells at the maximum spell slot. So their spells are always powered up. Sometimes there's a benefit to this, and sometimes it isn't. But their spell slots, the level of those do not change. It's always the same. Lastly, we have the Monk. As Ted mentioned, there's other classes that get spell casting ability, and the Monk fuel their spells using key points, so they don't use spell slots at all, but they do work just like spells, and that's going to be completely different from our other casters. With that, let's get into the actual aspects of multiclassing. As we mentioned, and that's where these fractions kind of come in and become important. We have third, half, and full. What you're going to do, if you have more character classes that are spellcasters than just one, you're going to add them up and determine what level spellcaster you are. So if you are doing all full casters, it's really easy. They just get added up. It's a whole number. If you're 2 levels of cleric and 2 levels of wizard, you are a 4th level caster. You will have access to 2nd level spell slots, but you're still only a 2nd level wizard and a 2nd level cleric. So you only know 1st level spells for either of them. So it's important to look at. So what does that mean that happens for your 2nd level spell slots that you don't have 2nd level spells to cast?
So here's where, with what Dave mentioned earlier about being able to use a higher level spell slot to power up your spells. So for instance, as that example, you've got a 2nd level wizard, 2nd level cleric, and you happen to know the magic missile spell. Typically it does 3 bolts of magical energy when you cast magic missile. Well, because you now have access to a 2nd level spell slot, you could use that spell slot to cast your magic missile, thus allowing you to send an extra bolt for 4 bolts at your enemy or enemies. This would allow you to then, use more magic since you do not actually have a 2nd level spell that you could cast.
Now, that being said, say you need to use a 1st level spell, you only have a 2nd level spell slot left, and you don't have any spells left that can be powered up, or the spell you need isn't one you can power up. For instance, you want to use shield to block an enemy's attack at you, but you only have that 2nd level spell slot. Does it mean you can't cast it? No, it doesn't. It means you can use that spell. You don't get an extra benefit for using that higher spell slot. So spell slots can always be used to cast lower level spells than the slot, but again, like we mentioned earlier, you cannot go the other way. Now we get into where it's a little more complicated, and that is your third and half casters. But it's not really that hard. If you're a third caster, Arcane Trickster, Eldritch Knight, you just divide your character level by 3, and that's how many levels you have as a caster level. So if you're a 3rd level Arcane Trickster and a 5th level wizard, you would be a 6th level caster.
So now remember, you have to round down. So if you are an Eldritch Knight and you are 5th level, that means you are still only adding 1 caster level to your overall pool. So, your 3rd level wizard, 5th level Eldritch Knight, you are still a 4th level caster until you gain 1 more level in Eldritch Knight.
Now, with half casters, it works exactly the same. It's just instead of dividing by 3, you're dividing by 2. Again, add them together, and that determines what you can do. Now, again, the specific spells you can access as far as spell levels is based on your character class. So, if you are a 4th level paladin, you are a 4th level paladin, and you have to look and see what your progression is to see what you could actually prepare for the day.
You can prepare based on each individual class, but then when you actually go into what you can cast, you have to look at your overall casting level. So by combining multiple casting classes together, you have a much greater pool of potential that you can combine together. I have a lot of lower level spells. I have a lot that I can prepare each day, but when I go to actually cast, I don't have as much power as if I was a single class caster. So more options, less power.
Now, earlier we mentioned those other types of casting. It's important to note how they interact with multiclassing. If you're a wizard and you're a warlock, whatever level wizard you are, that's what level you are. Whatever level warlock, that's what level you are. They do not mix. They don't intertwine. But that being said, you could use wizard spell slots to cast warlock spells that you know, and vice versa.
Now, you will be able to add those warlock spell slots into whatever else you get through wizard. In this case, it is an addition. You just combine it all together rather than having things apart and calculating via a formula. In the way of the 4 elements, you are just casting those specific spells using your key points, so that spell slots don't even come into account when you're talking about mixing this formula together.
Now, there's one question that I know is going to come up and people ask all the time. What if you have those higher level spell slots, but you don't have the spells that you can cast them with? Say I'm a wizard and I find a scroll for a 3rd level spell slot, but I have no 3rd level spells. Can I use it? The answer is no. That is based off of a class feature, and the spells that you have access to is actually based off the class level. For those, we do not mix the spell slots. They are completely separate. We know this can be one of the more confusing aspects of Dungeons & Dragons, but with a little work, it can resolve itself fairly easily. Hopefully this video helps you out.
So in those examples, or in that example, you could very well hold on to that spell scroll until you are a strong enough wizard to be able to copy a 3rd level spell into your book, or you can treat it as a magic item as treasure and be able to cast, when you so need it. But if you want another video on Nerdarchy's Guide to Multiclassing in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you might want to check it out right here.
Did you know Nerdarchy creates content for 5e for players and DMs alike on Patreon?
But that's not all we do. We also do live chats, monthly giveaways, and our patrons are automatically entered into our monthly giveaways.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.